Hey guys, welcome
Nice.
to Splints and Whiskey. Got old Mr. Dennis Lyons here. He's a legend amongst the soft medical community. But first comes first. Like, hey, horse soldiers, thanks guys. You didn't. I bought it myself, but if you want to send me some, I'll drink it. We'll get this topped up. So yeah, welcome to Splints and Whiskeys. Dennis Lyons
Thanks.
today is our guest. So Dennis and I have crossed and intermingled paths throughout my entire career, and I have many things to thank, or I have many thanks to give to you for setting the standard of what became what we all fell in on. So, without further ado, I'll let you introduce yourself, so I don't have to talk as much.
Yeah. So Dennis Lyons, I've been retired now for almost 10 years. And but before that, spent 21 years in the Army. For about three-quarters of that, I was in SOF. I was kind of a little bit of a weirdo of how I made it into SOF. I spent some time as a lab technician and I hated that. Reclassed to be a medic, and then I found myself at an infantry battalion on the DMZ in Korea. That was a blast. And then somehow I got sent to Womack Army Medical Center and working in the emergency room and took care of some folks, some docs at the JSOC surgeon's office. Took note and asked me to come try out for a job. And the next 15 years were a blur.
Yeah,
So
feel that.
um, yeah, so it went fast, but it was a blast, and I would do it again in a second.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I feel that. I appreciate the interesting journeys into SOF. I was actually talking to one of my buddies who he's going through U-shoes right now, and he got in the 160 the same way. I think he mercilessly harassed Doug Wanacott until he gave up. And
Yeah,
I did the same thing with Mike Straight when I was coming in. He's like, all
yeah,
right, if we just
yeah,
say yes, this guy will leave us alone. So like, hey man, persistence pays off.
yeah. I know both of those guys. Doug and I spent a whole lot of time downrange together,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was. But what's funny about about that is uh, neither the Ranger Regiment or the 160th wanted me. But that was also at a time where I don't think either of them saw any of the packets that I sent in. So
Yep.
the recruiting in the early 2000s were really, really weird. You really had to be there and know somebody, and
Yep.
I didn't. So my next bet, I just got really lucky.
Yeah, man, that's the key. Access and placement. So, and what have you been up to for the past 10 years then?
Yeah. So when I retired, I was a senior medic at USASOC.
Hmm.
I came out of there. I was in this office of an absolute brain trust of Sergeant Major F. Bowling,
Yep.
Lieutenant Colonel at the time Jim Paramore,
Yep.
who I'd seemed to have the same cross paths from the time he was a second lieutenant all the way to a lieutenant colonel. And a guy named Dave Lowe, Sergeant First Class Dave Lowe, great 18 Delta. But I found myself in that office, and it was an absolute brain trust where on any given day or any given moment, you might be the smartest guy in the room,
Hmm.
or you might be the dumbest guy in the room, and it ebbed and flowed that fast. And I was primarily working medical simulation and training
Yep.
there, although, and then managing all the 68 whiskeys, 68 whiskey ones, and then the low density MOSs
Yeah. Us,
in
us
USASOC.
problem children.
Nah, you guys were easy. Like, you guys were easy. You and the Rangers were easy. You guys took care of yourselves. I think I called the senior medic from those units like once a quarter. Hey, you need anything?
Yeah.
Or just to tell them to stop taking my dudes out of the course. Um, you know, but that you guys were easy. It was the others that were real hard. Civil affairs was going through a Manning
That's
crisis at
right.
the time. The PSYOP groups, the 528. It was always, and then we were only at 50% strength anyways on
Right.
whiskey one, so everybody was kind of at a 1-to-1 dwell, and things were pretty rough. But when I got out, I was like, what do I do? There was really nothing to do. We didn't have the pathway that you see now for whiskey ones in
Right.
in the in the medcom. And it was right as Sergeant Major Gerald Eckert came on,
Oh yeah.
and he was the real champion originally for the whiskey ones, and that transition happened quickly. A guy named Sergeant Major ended up being Sergeant Major Litmore, and
Yep.
he and I were transitioning, and that's when Sergeant Major Ecker was like, "What are you doing?" It's like, "I'm retiring. There's nothing for me to do." And I missed that window, and it's okay. I don't regret it. I got out. I figured the best place for me to impact the next generation is getting out, doing some training,
Yep.
and then being an industry liaison, because at the time a lot of industry folks didn't have Roll One experts,
Right.
and so there was a lot of crazy stuff happening. So I worked at a consulting firm where I was kind of a liaison to large industry partners,
Right.
which then I was teaching for a few different contractors. I had 4 or 5 clients. Some of them were large companies, very large companies, and just helping them get their products in,
Yeah.
and we got there.
Yeah.
So
No, that's yeah. You're in the belly of the beast of industry. We won't call you an industry guy, a dirty industry guy. Man,
so
I went to JMX and yeah, it's like I don't want to be a dirty industry guy. I'm just here to help.
so what's funny? I actually spoke at Colorado University. They do a research symposium. This is
Yeah.
their first year. Dr. Vic Babardo, Sean Keenan,
Yeah.
great staff out there. And that got mentioned 4 or 5 times, like the dark side.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't view it that way. I view it as this is a place you can impact when you get out. You can impact the next generation in
Yep.
many ways. You can get out and be a trainer on the active duty side.
Yep.
You can do like what, a couple other guys have done, go into government jobs where
Yep.
you're, doing operations and things like that. But there's a place for us in the industry. And what I've done at the current company I'm at now, very large wound care company, Smith and
Yep.
Nephew, um, you know, basically operationalizing their portfolio and taking things in places that they've never been,
Right.
and potentially giving medics capabilities that they haven't had, that they're gonna need in this next fight. So
Yeah.
I don't I'm okay with being in the industry. It's but you got to remain true to who you are,
I think that
and
that's
that's
the big
important.
one. Yeah, because like I before I got out, like North American Rescue, I was sniffing around them for their foreign sales team. But when they transferred to Henry Schein, things kind of fell apart. But
Mhm.
yeah, that's the thing is like I'm a firm believer. Like the guys who are anti-industry, I'm like, hey, guy, like, chill, man. I get it. Like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm not here to sell you stuff. Like, I'm still like this gives me the access and placement to help and shape and influence that next generation because like that's a lot of the stuff I'm doing. Like I'm going down to Selma this year to present on the Thames track of all things. Like shout out to my cop friends. Um, I think that's what guys got to realize. Like if you want to be able to still be relevant, like you got to find a place that you can have a seat at the table still, and b like that can pay your way to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, one of the things that I was kind of sad, seeing the industry when it was all small companies,
Yeah.
when it was still 18 Deltas and PJs and things like that owned the companies. It was when we started getting private equity in the mix around 2010, 2020, that period of time where it became a business.
Yep.
I think before it was a passion, and people were doing it truly to give back. And now it's a business.
Right.
You won't find anybody running those companies that have actually done the work.
Right.
And I do miss that. I do miss that portion.
Yeah, well, that's the hard thing too. It's like part of the reason why I've leaned fully into this thing, like this podcast. Like, all right, we're starting to see the erosion of skill, like and experience. Like,
Yeah.
I work part time at the Mystic on Fort Lewis, and it's not I want to say disheartening, but it's definitely like it's like, hey, I'm watching the Walker dip happen in real time, and
Yeah.
that's frustrating.
It's the Walker dip. I love that. What's so funny about that is I was sitting in the front row when Alistair Walker gave that talk at Soma in 2013,
Yep.
because there were no more seats in the back. That's where I normally sit. I got there late, and I ended up, and I wasn't even there for his talk. I was there for another talk, and I was like, well, I'll sit through this. And man, when he I remember turning around and seeing, Bob Mabry and a couple other folks, and my mind was just blown. And I remember going back into that brain trust office
Yep.
that I talked about, and I'm like, that's our mantra,
Yep.
avoiding the walker dip.
Yep.
And we, but what's funny is that I see that exact same thing happen in industry,
Yep.
like, and you see it now with the war dropping off and
Yep.
everybody's, the sales aren't there. How do you get out of the walker dip? What you get out through innovation,
Yep.
right? Through innovation and training, innovation in materials, and industry side's no different. So
Right.
I love that concept of the walker dip, but I always ask people, it's like, all right, what are you doing to avoid it?
Right. Well,
Right.
that's a big thing too. Like I look at, I think my I never was like hardcore anti-industry, but I definitely made your guys' lives a little bit more. But like Bobby McCall, I think it still over at NAR. We
Yeah.
went to soccer
Rob.
together.
Yeah.
Or Robert, not Bobby, since he's all grown up now.
Yeah.
It was always our favorite thing. Like I still remember Derek Flowers. Rob Miller came into the 160th with his unbreakable litter buckle, and
Oh,
Derek just like
yeah.
stomps it on the ground. It's like, okay, Rob. It's like, yeah, well, that's what you get with medics. Like, you want something broken, give it to a medic. But like my thing I'm
Yeah.
seeing now is like, yeah, we had an equipment gap during the GWAT that was like the human capital was there, but then we're like, all right, we need gear. I'm starting to
Yep.
see the shift now. It's like we're too gear focused and we're not human capital focused enough.
Correct. Correct. And that goes into that first soft truth, man. Humans are more important than hardware. I like to say humans are more important than anything,
Yeah.
because that is really. But yeah, it goes into. It's so funny. I had a discussion today with some leaders at my company, and they're like, "Where do you come up with this stuff?" And I'm like, "Look, this is going to sound incredibly cheesy, but early in my career, I had to memorize the 11 principles of leadership, the NCO creed,
Yep.
and then later I learned the soft truths." And really, if you carry those three things with you, that's pretty good. That's pretty good guidelines for how to live your life.
Yeah, and I'm doing work with the Honor Foundation. I'm telling you right now, like you could make serious money just doing MDMP for civilians, or
Correct.
the joint planning process. Like man, like yeah, they eat that stuff up because hey, it works. Like you look at the
Yeah.
military; it's a global corporation that has the same common operating language across the world,
Correct.
which is
And
pretty
there,
impressive.
and yeah, and you'd be surprised how people are amazed at a 5 paragraph op order. You know, the other thing, I've always faced, and it's funny, you talk about the industry and civilian side. I've heard on a few occasions, well, you don't understand what it's like to, be in a public traded company. It's like, yeah, actually, I was in the largest public traded company. Well, we're accountable to shareholders. Well, I'm accountable to soldiers, their families, and their parents.
And
That's pretty important.
yeah, and oh, by the way, the American taxpayer is our
Yeah,
is our
yeah,
sponsor.
yeah. So it's funny in that sense. The parallels between industry and military. It's like
Yeah.
same thing I always tell anybody. If it doesn't matter what you're doing, um, no matter how special it is or what you're doing, somebody's done it before you.
Oh, bro, 100%, man. Like that's the thing. Like, hey, the military to begin with. Like, I just had a chat with a buddy. I like to actively recruit for the Honor Foundation as much as I can with all my degenerates from Fourth Battalion, 160th. So I was like,
Yeah,
hey, dude, like, guess what? The unit's gonna keep going when you walk out that door. So take the time to
correct,
focus on yourself, my guy. Yeah,
correct.
that's one of those things. That's the beauty of the system in general. It's like everybody's replaceable. Like,
Yeah,
don't get me
that
wrong.
that
Like people like yourself and some of the other people you've mentioned are like singular experienced individuals that no one else
yeah,
can come close to the experiences they've had, but the machine still works.
that's correct. But if you did your job as a leader,
Mm-hmm.
you should be replaceable. That's the way I ran the team that I
Yep.
was in charge of at JSOC. Was I could get hit by a, this is my phrase I used. If I got hit by a bus today, any one of my guys could run the
Yep.
team, and they could.
Yep.
So when I left for a 4 month rotation to go do a special thing somewhere, I was perfectly comfortable with what I was going to come back to.
Yep.
Um,
That's
yeah,
the key. The key to military leadership is like you want to like if you're a good leader, you're going to not be missed.
yeah,
Like but they will miss you eventually. But like when you walk out that door, they shouldn't notice or skip a beat.
The mission doesn't degrade.
Yeah,
They're going to miss you because you had fun together, whether it
right.
was, playing horseshoes between missions or whatever you were doing. But there's not going to be a degradation in
Yeah,
capability.
and that
That's the key to success.
yeah, I still like actually I was back at Fourth Battalion yesterday because whenever I work on Fort Lewis, I always swing by the shop and say what's up. But it's like it's cool to be able to like have that connection to the legacy that because I left under terms were less than favorable, but like it's good to see the legacy that you build still be alive and well. Like I see the work like in USASOC that you set the conditions for, like still 10 years later, all the conditions are set and being executed in a manner. It's nice because we work in some it's like the intangibles we do so much in the military, like
Yeah.
getting that legacy is key. It's like having kids.
Yeah. And what's funny about that too is, and you won't find this anywhere else. You won't find this in the corporate world. And I don't even know if you find this in the regular army or the regular military, but there are some jobs that you're in where there's a legacy of people,
Yeah.
and that senior medic job at USASOC, and I know the senior medic jobs at a lot of the units are the same way, where it's like the guy that's currently in the job runs into something
Mm-hmm.
and you'll get a phone call and you'd be
Yeah.
like, "Hey, have you ever seen this?" Like, or do you know this guy?
Yeah.
And you're able to help him through. I mean, I still get one of those phone calls occasionally, and
Yep.
it's pretty cool because you don't have that in the corporate world.
No.
You and I don't think you have that in the big military. And I think that might be contained in the medical side. I think we do a better job
Well,
of our legacy and
it,
helping the next generation.
it's like Mike Hetzler always says, like it's the medical
Yep.
mod. Like, dude, that guy's like a legend in all of NATO
Absolutely.
and the U.S. military. It's like you say his name in Europe and everybody knows him.
Yep.
I did Remedy 1 year when he was out there, and it's just like, yeah, it's literally it's all networking. It's a mafia, like freaking John Dobbins being the Medcom sergeant major now. Like you
We
brought up
saw
Lit.
that coming.
Yeah, man, you brought up Lit Moore. Chris Marshall was down there. I still remember going through whatever SLC, yeah, SLC, and like we had 3 or 4 whiskey ones in the course, and we had an opportunity to do a town hall with the Metcom, like the Surgeon General, and we ambushed her. And Sergeant Major
Yes.
Eckert was not pleased. And then like Chris Marshall and freaking Litmore pulled us aside afterwards, like, "Hey guys, we got it. Like, no,
Yeah.
maybe not. Don't do a complex ambush on the Surgeon General in front of an entire AMED town hall."
Yeah. Yeah. Poor form. But I mean, that's what we're able to do that in our own formation,
Right.
and then we go into that formation, and yeah, there's, that is one thing that I kind of always had, it was weird where I was because we kind of had to be on our best behavior all the time.
Yep.
And so, but be honest, I probably wasn't on my best behavior all the time. So
Yeah, it's an art form. Like it took me a little while, like because I still remember when I was an E4 in the unit, like I did something and got in like one of the 2-4 PJs. Like we got in an argument about something, and then I got an email from the 724 commander. I'm like, at the time I had no effing clue like how I'm like. I look back in hindsight, I'm like, bro, you're a nobody specialist, and you got
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
this big boss freaking coming down on you. You're like, oh, maybe you should.
Well, at least you didn't do what I do now, is just type unsubscribe. So, or or opt out or
Yeah.
something like
No,
that. So,
no, thank you. Yeah, man.
yeah,
That's the. I think for me, like looking back on leadership, like when I try to mentor younger people, it's like if you can ask a tactful question of a leader that makes
yeah,
it like, "Hey, sir," or "Hey, ma'am," for my like just for my own professional development and understanding, like, can you explain this to me? And like, it's a good way to blow holes in their terrible plans.
yeah. What's funny about that is I joke about it all the time, and I look at a lot of that as like a seer exercise.
Yeah,
It's like I can't tell you how useful that training was in my everyday life, and I think that's probably the skill that I use most every
yeah.
day.
Oh,
Advanced
100%.
negotiations and how to be in an interview.
Yeah, no, I think too. Like you look at kind of because we were enlisted guys, and like like unfortunately, when it comes to like softs, a little like special operations, a little bit different. Enlisted carries a little bit more weight, but like at the end of the day, when you're looking at the fifth soft truth of we all need conventional assets, like
Yes.
how to shape and influence that realm. It's like if they don't have a bird on their chest, like you ain't gonna get nothing changed.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is that it's funny that fifth soft truth really disappeared for a long time. In fact, I didn't even know it existed until I got back up to the USOC surgeon's office and F Bowling was, hey man, fifth soft truth. Like,
Yep.
what? There's only four, you know. And yeah, nope, there was five, but that
Yep.
that fifth one went away for a while.
Yeah, that was the crazy. So the fallout from the GWAT that I looked at from the soft side of things is like soft is a supporting effort. Like we're there
Yep.
to support the battle space owner and support their main effort initiatives. But like that was the issue with Afghanistan. It was a soft fight from the beginning,
Yeah.
and it kind of never really shifted.
Yeah.
And
It was, yeah, it was that was the flip. It was soft was there and the conventional army was in support. I mean, not completely, but it felt that way a lot of
yeah,
times, especially being on the soft side of things.
I think that like you bring up the fifth truth, like in medicine, like man, I'll tell you right now, like there is nowhere else in the military that the fifth soft truth, which is like so for those paraphrasing it, special operations can't conduct operations without conventional assets. Like we look at the 528th, which is the USASOC sustainment element that has surgery built into it. Like
Yeah.
in medicine, like you cannot execute a health service and support plan without conventional forces. Period. Hard stop. Like
Correct.
effectively. And I think that was one of the things, like one of the important takeaways I took later in my career. And like I credit Ahmad Hawk. Did you ever work with Ahmad?
I know the name, but
Yeah,
no, I never worked with
he
him.
was a out of town surgeon for you guys, and then like one of the most influential people who like got me to see like oh that makes so much sense. It's like hey just because I can do surgery in the back of this thing, I'm not going to if I don't have to, but I can do advanced resuscitative care with a badass team. And it's like all right, yeah. So then looking at kind of how we're building out medicine too, like you look what the work you're doing with Smith and Nephew, like the stuff you're selling, like it's not like you don't, it's not sexy, but guess what?
It's not.
The not sexy stuff is what saves lives.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know how that all came about. So in the early days of prolonged field care, when we were still calling it extended care, 2010,
Mm-hmm.
11, 12, we had, as I left JSOC before I went to USOC, I was in the 95th Civil Affairs Brigade,
Yep.
and eventually took over. Funny the pathway. Um, 98th Civil Affairs, which is the Southcom. I
Mm-hmm.
took over for Sergeant Major retired Jerry Schofield, who took over for John Dominguez, who took over. It's like everybody came out of that
Yep.
battalion, but I replaced Ian Dunbar as the senior medic and just had these medics coming back from both the Pacific, Africa, and South America. It's like we're doing these med caps and things like that, and we're seeing all these weird wounds, and we have no idea what to do. And that's when I started kind of geeking out on this wound care stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember going to my current boss at Smith and Nephew, and I told her, she tells the story way better, but I was like, I was like, because everybody else was walking by her like, yeah, we don't use that stuff. And I'm like, we don't today, but we're gonna need it eventually.
Right.
And now with the transition to Lisco, it's really hitting us in the face. And that's what me I work with. My boss Kim Tarka, and
Yep.
then I now work with a PhD scientist, Colonel retired Stu Tyner,
Yep.
used to run the midrip program. Guy's a genius. But we get to look at combat wound infection,
Yep.
the way that it's happening today in Ukraine,
Yep.
in the Ukraine Russian war, and adapting that to Lisco. And here's the crazy thing: a lot of the same products that we use on my grandma, my
Yep.
mom, and it's no different than what we did in trauma.
Right.
You look at blood and blood transfusions, and I always ask people, like, okay, of all that equipment we use for blood and blood transfusions, for the first 10 years of that, what was tailor made for us? And it's none of it. It was all
Exactly.
commercial off the shelf stuff.
Yep.
And, it wasn't until, really honestly, it wasn't until Monty Leha made
Hmm. Yeah.
um,
The Delta
hit,
development cooler.
yeah, the Delta development stuff. That was the real first thing that was purpose made for the
Yep.
military for that. Before that, we were just using all commercial off the shelf stuff. So we look at that, we take what the civilian world does, we adapt it to our
Yep.
practice, and then maybe the products will evolve into something that's specific or dual use.
Right.
But that's always the model.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, like so much of like I having my last 4 years, I was teaching cops primarily, and it's like it makes you realize like how much of the purpose designed gear you really don't need.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. So like it took me again another like tactical combat casualty care absolutely saved a ton of lives, but it's like what I don't like about the protocol or the way
Mhm.
we like the way medics think. It's like, all right, I got him to the roll two, which is the surgery asset, closest surgery asset alive. I'm like, and when I ran training, I'm like, hey guys, like I don't care if you got him to the roll two alive. Like I want to know you got him to the roll two in the best condition for the best quality of life when they walk out
Yeah.
of that roll four recovery hospital in the United States of America.
Yeah.
And I think like looking at what you're doing now with wound care and stuff, it's like I just was over in the Netherlands with Nick Graham doing a prolonged field care exercise for those the Dutch Marsoff, and it's like
Yeah.
that. And to be honest, like I'll give Twig, so Caleb Twilliger, freaking, I'm gonna give him a shout out because to be honest, like he coined the term delayed evacuation casualty management. Because like
Yes.
PFC is fine, like it's a good term, and but when words have meanings, like hey, the commander still needs to know that evacuation is still the goal, but if it gets delayed, can we do something about it?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Twig's another legend in his own right.
sir,
Always good to see him. But yeah, no, that's, and Mike Hetzler came up with that concept of, if you're going to do an intervention, do it right the first time.
100%.
He called it kind of a damage control at the point of injury.
Yep.
What can I do that when I do get a surgeon in front of me, he can get cold steel on him quickly,
Right.
without having to redo my IVs or
Yep.
redo my
Yep.
airway or redo all of this stuff. Yeah, that was Mike Hetzler.
Yep. No, and that's the thing. Like I look at this, like so there's the big move in the civil side, resuscitate before intubate. It's
Yeah,
like yeah, I can go down a whole sidebar of GME education, but think about this. Like I got Mark Anderson's a good buddy of mine from out here, former 18 Bravo, tech committee dude. He was a King County Medic One guy, and we had a chat. I was like, hey man, like how many unnecessary intubations do we do for skills maintenance?
yeah,
Like you think about every GME program, every first year, second year, third year resident, they have to do so many procedures to get through. And it's like, dude, like it's just setting a precedence to do unnecessary medical treatment.
yeah, yep,
And,
yeah.
uh,
You're spot on.
so like I think that's for you since you've done a lot of work in the sim space. Like for us in the like soft medic side, I remember going through school. Like you go to Tampa or Flint or wherever you did your rotation, you have your like your procedure sheet. Like, hey, we need you
Yeah.
to focus on the procedures. Like, what do you feel like is the best way to get medics to think about like the why behind the procedure?
Yeah. So it's so the why behind the procedure. It's funny because I saw this when we started training prolonged field care, and I thought about it back to TCCC, and it's specifically with simulation because that's what I was doing. At the time, we had this focus on procedures, procedures, procedures,
Mm-hmm.
and the bulk of prolonged field care is boredom and looking at your patient. It's like
Yep.
I do a procedure. Okay, now what?
Right.
I remember one time it was I won't say the unit that we were training, but we were doing a G clinic sort of thing, and
Mm-hmm.
and the guys are all TCCC masters, which good on them because we always say there's no PFC without good
Yep.
TCCC.
Yep.
So these guys were solid on TCCC. But then when we threw him a simple anaphylaxis patient with a closing airway,
Yep.
it's like we're going straight to Crike, and it's like, okay, well, that you finished, you've gotten them through the crisis, what now? And they're like, I don't know. We
Hmm.
we we were never told what to do after we Crike a patient if we have to take it out, or
Yep.
and so there's there are some of those things that where T-triple-C and prolonged field care they don't mix. So
Right.
you can't take what I do over there and make it work over here.
Right.
And you know, the other thing I see, and this is, I'll bang on the industry a little bit. I'll bang on the industry a little bit on this one and I wasn't very popular with the company that I worked with that actually sold simulation because I was interested in training people in the best possible way.
Yes.
All those simulation modalities, whether it's cadavers, full body mannequins, task trainers, computer simulation, AR, VR,
Hmm.
whatever the modality you're using, there's no one modality to kind of rule them all. You need a combination, and the plastic mannequins are good. They're great for T-triple-C. Um, well, they're good for T-triple-C. Let's say that. Um, but when you try to use the same mannequin for prolonged field care,
Hmm.
what am I doing?
Yep.
Right? What I need there is I need a good role player that's well trained that I
Yep.
can do a physical exam on. Um, we've kind of lost the art of physical exam. Um, yeah,
Oh,
it,
bro.
you know, yeah,
I got kids coming through table eights, the medic refresher, like that have not touched a human for the entire 2 years.
yeah, and that's one of the easiest skills to train. Like because you can do that through hip pocket training with
Hmm.
two medics or I tell the crazy story about I was deployed with a group and I was the medic and we were on a fob in the middle of nowhere and they would come in and they'd be like, hey doc, my ankle hurts, and I would do a full physical exam on them and they're like, not I wouldn't do like the rectal or anything
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that, but I would do an overblown physical exam just for my own,
yeah. Yep.
you know, we weren't in a hurry. We were in the team house.
Yep.
We had all the, and that's where I kind of kept my physical exam skills up, and then of course, we'd go out and I'd take all their pulse points and draw an
Hmm.
X on it. I'm drawing X's on all their pulse points, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, I'm just making it. I just got a reference point. What I was really doing is, so if they got injured that night or 2 or 3 days later, I knew where their pulse points are,
Yeah.
but also I could have a lay team member go over and check pulse because I'm like, hey, check his dorsalis pedis. I'm like, they're
What's
like, what
the?
the hell is that? It's like you
Yeah.
see that X on top of his foot, put your
Yep.
fingers on there and count the pulse.
Yep.
It I used physical exam for many different things, but that's the biggest. I mean, it makes you a better medic.
Oh, it's and the thing I always say about physical exam, like if you know what normal looks like, you can recognize abnormal. And
Yeah,
then and if you can explain what you're looking at abnormal, like you'll be fine. Like because yeah, I did this. It's my favorite game to play. Is like when people are so like trauma focused. All right,
yeah,
here's your unresponsive hypovolemic hypoglycemic malaria patient.
yeah,
They're like,
yeah,
ah! I'm like, and then the number of needle decompressions that have been dropped on medical patients in training
yeah,
is, yeah, I'm like, bro, like that, stop.
yeah. Or the funniest one ever. It was Jerry Schofield and I. We had a kid come straight out of the course. We were at civil affairs at the time. Kid came straight out of the course. He won the best trauma clinic title there. So the leadership gets him and they think it's like, oh, this is going to be amazing. I'm like, watch this.
Hmm.
We gave him a patient with no injuries
Hmm.
and just but we did actually put the simulation modality we were using, we put about an extra liter of blood in his chest
Yep.
and we called and it was a blunt trauma scenario.
Yep.
Kid was completely lost
Hmm.
because he kept looking at us like There were no wounds. There was
Mhm.
no, the mechanism was there, but he ignored it because in the
Yep.
schoolhouse, he never
Yep.
had to process the mechanism. And then he gets this patient that wasn't like the cookie cutter
Hmm.
algorithm sheet that he had in the course,
Yep.
and he failed horribly.
Yep.
And of course, that was at the time where we stopped giving people feedback on trauma lanes
Hmm.
because the patient should react the way that I
Yep.
do the wounding protocol. And completely, the medic would look up at us like, I'm checking vitals.
Okay.
We're
Check
like,
them.
no, we wouldn't even say that. We would just look around. And he was so used in the schoolhouse to being fed that
Yep.
that that he was just lost. And his patient ended up dying.
Hmm.
It was horrible. And that's when I went to the leadership who's like, they just thought we were too hard on him. And I'm like, look, I've been doing this a long time. I can look at any medic, figure out their strengths and weaknesses and exploit those,
Dude.
you know, and they'll learn how to do that too, and it'll make them better medics.
Yep. No, 100%. Like I think the my biggest gripe with TC3 is that like I remember because I joined in 2004, so I'm a younger buck, but like
Yeah.
TC3 was not mainstream yet in the conventional force, like not even
Yep.
close. Like I still got I got Talon 2 litters one time, like the walk bags. I got those
Yeah.
on my strikers in my first deployment. They went back in the Tricon because I couldn't figure out how to open the litters. I
Yeah.
tell that story every time because like it makes me look like an idiot, and I'm
Some
happy with
people
that.
are still trying to figure out how to open them.
Well, my favorite like when working with cops or like non-medic people, like I give them a towel, I'm like, hey, open it, and they're like,
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, exactly. That's what I felt like 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Shit,
Yeah.
20. Lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, yeah. The problem with like the schoolhouse system, the training scars, like TC3, like if it's outside the algorithm, like they have no effing clue, no
None.
clue.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest like when you talk about simulations, training modalities, like I'll give like casualty resources from the UK, like the best freaking company when it comes Stu, give you guys a shout out. Like those guys are the best because most of them are combat injured Ministry of
Yeah.
Defense dudes from the UK. They know
Yeah.
all the things. They stay in role because like
Yes.
Nick Graham and I were talking about this, and then Holland. It's like and Lucas from Sweden was there as well, and like we're talking about how to leverage all the training modalities. So in your experience, like how did you best leverage all the available simulations, like and
Yeah.
to give the most well-rounded training event?
Yeah. So really, so here's what we come up with, and it's funny because I talked with Liz and Ty about this a little while ago, and you know, there's some artificiality, but the best way to transition from modality to modality is at your transitions of care.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
so when I transition from point of injury care to tactical field care, if I need to transition my simulator there, I can. When I transition from tactical field care to evacuation, I transition there. When I go from my evacuation to my surgical team, I transition there. And we did that. We did that at the unit. We used to teach the Ranger pre-deployment
yeah,
CTMs, or we would do our big med multilats with the 160th. Well, we'd have everybody there. And that's what we did a lot of times. We'd transition from one simulation modality to another um, based on what was being done. So when the Rangers or the point of injury people handed off to a surgical team, the modality changed.
right,
So that to me, it gets you the best. You're looking for natural breaks in the
right,
flow of training to swap out the modalities, and because every modality has a strength and weak has a long list of strengths and weaknesses. And it's funny that briefing or that presentation I did at Soma in 2013 on simulation. Um, I've reviewed it a couple times and it's still solid.
yeah,
12 years later, it's still, everything is still accurate in there. It's like the strengths and weaknesses of all the modalities. Now, cadavers have gotten a little bit easier to use and a little less expensive,
hmm,
a little more, live tissue always kind of comes and goes in terms of its, ability to be done. But it's, you know, the simulation modality, if it's used properly, is going to make the training. There's
yeah,
no perfect simulation modality. Like I always say, the AR VR is great for algorithm
Yep.
acquisition, like it's not good for tactile things,
Right.
and it's really not good for like the tactics and moving. It's good for learning algorithms.
Right.
Um, and so like I said, every modality has its different strengths and weaknesses, and you have to look at what your training goal is and who you're looking to train to pick the right modality.
Yeah, I think that's you're dancing around the next thing I'm going to guess, like
Yeah.
instructor development.
Yeah.
Because that man, like I'll tell you right now, like that is like where I see the biggest failure point across the board is like
Yeah.
I went through the Armor's instructor course. I'm pretty sure I came out a worse instructor.
Yeah.
Like how do you feel like what I mean, how do we get like, as we lose experience, 'cause that's the problem. Is like all like you and I are the experienced ones, and we're no longer
Yeah.
wearing the suit. Like, how do we
Yeah.
get our instructors who don't have experience to teach people who don't have experience?
So yeah, the teaching is one thing. I look at it this: we have to use everything as a training event.
Yep.
Everything's a training event. When I got to civil affairs, um, one of the things that we would do is we would do pre-deployment CTMs, or
Right.
your validation exercise, to make sure a medic could do the task and go down range. And the way that looked was the the veterinarian used to, hang the drugs for the patient and it was good to go. And I'm like, why is the veterinarian hanging the patient, handling the drugs? Medics can do that. And then the other thing,
Yep.
the senior medic or one of his designated representatives would proctor a trauma lane.
Yep.
And I'm like, I don't think we're getting the best training benefit. So what I did was, I'm like, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to run trauma lanes. It's an all day event. Everybody's doing it. But it wasn't just me grading. I had every medic
Yep.
watching
There
and
you go.
grading. And I called it the peanut gallery proctoring system, where you were going to get heckled. And
Yep.
and we had some very defined business rules. But what happened was, and this is what I saw. I took a battalion where I had 8 or 10 medics, and we would start doing this training. The first guy ate up every single
Mm-hmm.
time. Didn't matter how good they were. Everybody was just, they had a little bit of ring rust going on. If
Right.
I'm
Yep.
using
Yep.
an MMA, uh, an
Yep.
MMA sort of reference, everybody had ring rust. They made mistakes. The peanut gallery tore them up, top to bottom.
Yep.
And I always went to that guy, because I had one guy almost in tears one time. I'm like, hey, man, you're going to get a shot at redemption, and you're going to get a shot to tear them up. So
Yep.
just hang out. This system had so many upsides, but what I would see is the next guy that went didn't make as many mistakes, or maybe not even any of the same ones.
Right.
And then the next guy that went got better. The next guy
Yep.
that went got better. The next guy that went got better. Next thing you know, I got guys that are way outside their golden hour,
Yep.
crushing it.
Yep.
And then what I would always do with those first two guys that went, I always had alibi patients in case
Yep.
something happened. And I always run those first guys through again. And what I found was those guys were 100% different from the first time they went to the second time they went. And the so not only did guys get better, did medics get better, guys and girls. We had girls
Yep.
at the time, women, females, but they got better. But then the other thing is too is they got more comfortable with each other, and that's
Right.
something we didn't have. Like our medics were so walled off, even
Right.
within a single company. They had never seen each other work, or really
Yep.
even knew what each other's capabilities were. So when they did that, they got along better, they
Yep.
collaborated better. And guess what? I had a pick. If I had to replace a battalion senior medic, I had 5, 6, or 7, 8 dudes that I could pick from,
Well,
right? Because they've now, I don't know if they're still doing that, but to me, that was the best instructor development
yep.
thing. And it was kind of, it took out all the like how to stand up in front of a class and teach
Right.
things.
Yep.
I think if you can proctor a trauma lane really, really well and provide constructive feedback, delivering the material on stage is
Yep.
easy,
Yeah.
right? So that was what I did. That's what I did over there. And not only that, but I also taught the medics how to do the wounding and the
Right.
simulation. It's
Yeah.
like, all right, hey, this next guy's going. What do you guys think we should give him?
Right.
And they're like, oh, let's do gunshot wound here and open fracture here. And I'm like, all right, wound, like, come here. I'm going to teach you how to wound the
Right.
patient. Guys got so much better.
Yep.
So it's just a matter of not compartmentalizing that training
Yep.
and letting guys take, because the one thing that I was always kind of leery of is, if I'm the one setting the scenario, those medics are only going to be as good as I am, right?
Right.
That's why I've always lobbied for the Joint Trauma Registry to be a
Yep.
training database.
I
You know,
can concur.
why are we making up training scenarios when I have a
Oh,
whole database full of
speaking of
great
making
case
up
studies?
training scenarios, like when last time I went through Refresher, it's like, hey guys, we haven't been in Afghanistan for 6 years. Why are we still talking about it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
you hit the nail on the head with like getting involvement. Like I've learned so much more about medicine having to teach.
yeah.
Like, because you
Yep.
explain things like, oh, and to be honest, like I'll tell you right now, like the best thing I think for developing medics, in my opinion, is get them to teach non-medics in plain English.
Correct.
Like stop using like medical terminology. Like it's fine and dandy, like if you need to talk to a doctor, but at the end of the day, how many doctors are in the world? How many bystanders are in the world?
Yeah.
And like that's another thing with TC3 that like I I got a question for you actually. So when you ran
Yeah.
these simulations with all the medics, how many
Yep.
non-medics were involved?
So we actually had quite a bit, because we had what was called CTM, Combat Trauma Management XT, or cross training.
Yep.
So I would take the medics, we would go through that pre-deployment exercise, and then they would go back and teach their own teams of
Oh yeah.
non-medics,
Yep.
and they would run a scenario. So those medics got rid of the ring rust. They got used to doing the wounding, they got used to
Yep.
doing the anesthesia, and man, and then you put them in front of their team. You want to talk about a team that has confidence in their medic.
Yep.
Before, when it was like the veterinarian was doing the anesthesia and the medic didn't know how to wound, to do
Right.
this or that, because we're not taught that in the course.
Nope.
But then you come out of the course and it's like, here's your patient, go
Good
have
luck.
at it. It's like,
Yep.
so we
Okay.
started teaching that, and that credit goes out to Pete Benson,
Mm-hmm.
Colonel Pete Benson, who was the
Yep.
youth SOC surgeon at the time. He was the one, I briefed him what I was doing at Civil Affairs, of teaching protocols for wounding and training, and he's like, you need to roll that out to everybody.
Yes,
And
sir.
he let me do that. And but that I think is when we use that system, and then I put the medics in front of their teams, um, the confidence of the team leaders, team sergeants, and their NCOs was through the roof, because
Yep.
now they were confident in their medic, you
That's
know,
and that's
and
huge.
the
Like
medics were more confident in themselves.
that's like I still like the whole term doc. Like I remember getting to my first line unit. It was 2000, yeah, 2004. They just come back from the first striker pull to Iraq, and like when I got the combat vets calling like something happened, and then that was where like the saltiest of the salty dudes started calling me doc.
Yeah,
And like yeah,
yeah,
like, you don't realize like yeah, like you got to build that trust, like you got to build that rapport. And unfortunately, the soft side, like I loved hiring former Ranger medics,
yeah,
or like we had a ton of 2ID dudes from the strikers who were in fourth battalion, because like I love taking guys who had to earn their like got their teeth cut in the line. They know how
yeah,
to soldier, but more importantly, they know how to build rapport.
yeah, absolutely.
Because like yeah, that trust is huge. Because like I had this talk at AMSUS. Did you? Yeah, I think you were in the room. Like where I asked, hey,
Yeah,
what's the purpose of health services support, and no one could answer.
yes, yes.
Weird. But
A
it's
lot
like
of smart people in the room.
yeah, like it's returning combat power to the commander. Hey, all medics out there listening, your number one operational job is to give guns back to the commander. So like that's
Absolutely.
that's like why roll to like I still remember going to the schoolhouse and they're like, hey, yeah, a SOC medic can hold 3 polytraumas for 72 hours. I'm like, no,
Yeah,
he
no
can't.
way.
Where
Yeah,
where is
and
that written? Nowhere.
yeah, and it was Soma 2014 or 15 when Chris Burns was one of our surgeons, and Justin Ball
Yeah.
blew that out of the water. And I
Yep.
remember talking to them right before they went in to give the talk, and they're like, "We're about to piss a whole lot of people off, so just hang on." That was right around when prolonged field care was really kind of getting its legs. And you know what? We need the dissenters.
uh,
You know, to quote Mike Remley, we need the dissenters, and
yeah.
we need the people that are going against the grain.
And that's how we still that's how we stay relevant, man.
Absolutely.
We have the platform to, like, yeah, I've got the platform right here to be the salty asshole. It's like, hey guys, you're gonna kill a lot, dude. So back in 2017 when a certain theater was supposed to go very hot, like it was embarrassing, the Annex Q plan, the health
Yeah.
service support plan, like it was absolutely embarrassing, and there was just
Yeah.
people like smiling and nodding. I'm like, and that was like, to be honest, like I look at my strategic level like experience because I was like a tactical dude. Like I had no reason to be in that room besides the fact that I just happened to be in the place and I had
Yeah.
asked the right question. And when I went in there, I'm like, okay, cool. This is what we're gonna work with. Roger that. And it made me like, it was good exposure and allowed me like to walk into that room like an AMSUS and call people out.
Yeah. Well, I cut my teeth a little bit differently, and for being a JSOC was a little different. My rotations, I didn't like grow up into something.
Yeah.
My career was all over the place. My first deployment was that first push to Iraq,
Yeah.
where I was just a dude on a team doing things. My very next deployment, if you remember back in 2003, 2004,
Yep.
Operation Winter Strike.
Yep.
Um, um, I went over there to be with one of our SRTs, and Pineapple Sergeant Major Perez, shout out, legend, just nominated to the SOF
Major
Medical Hall of
legend.
Fame. Yeah, so Pineapple had to go home, and here I am. I'm the medical planner for the task force as a newly promoted E6,
hmm
right? And man, you want to talk about a steep learning curve. But I guess I did an okay job because I came back and did that about four more times over the next few years, and but even though it wasn't my primary reason for being there, I ended up in that ops role quite a bit, and
Yep.
that's one thing that now it's a little more, especially over in the civil affairs. We really taught medical planning and
Yes.
and the Annex Q and everything. We beat that up because it was a major capability.
Well, and that's another thing too. It's like, why? So you look at the warfighter or the service member, like why they like will take that hill knowing that they're going to take direct fire to their face. It's because, hey, Doc's there. Like you look at Hacksaw Ridge, like conscientious objector getting the Medal of Honor.
Yep.
Because like, and that's another thing for the medics out there that you got to realize, like half the dudes are going to fight and dudettes are going to fight wicked hard because they know Doc's got them.
They know you're there, and
Yep.
they know there's a surgical team
Yep.
within a certain period of time. Absolutely.
And
I
that's
used to see that with our SRTs. The assault forces used to treat our SRTs as part of the team, and that was really cool to see.
Yeah, that was one of my biggest, like, so again, credit goes back to Ahmad Hawk on this one, like because there was a little bit of this friction in our organizations when it came to like,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
they're creeping on our turf. I'm like, man, like here's the deal, homie. If I'm that dude shot in the freaking chest on the ground, there's no turf war.
Yeah, I want everybody there.
Yeah, exactly. If that's me, like, yeah, I want freaking Jim. I want Ahmad. I want freaking like, I want the guys. Like,
Yeah.
I'm confident in my abilities, but it's like, hey, like, all right, know how to do the job when you're by yourself. Got it. But same token, when you have additional help, like I would I would write myself out of med plans downrange when like, hey, like, why am I like, let's get medevac to repo over here because now I'm not stealing aircraft away from the assault force.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, and
Yeah.
that to me, like the medical planning aspect, like to be honest, like that's where I truly found my passion in the unit. Like, and like having you guys support, was like amazing. Like Misha, freaking all those guys, like
Yeah.
loved having your guys' level of support. But like when the theater shifted and it went away to like that was one of the like the silver lining was like as a enlisted medic, I got to do some med planning at a level that was like that's 0405 level freaking conventional forces.
Yeah. 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 That is you know, it was funny when I went to, so I went not, you know, we did ANOC, BNOC, all those things. But then I went to the battle staff, the battle staff NCO course at the
Yep.
Sergeant Major's Academy. And at that point, I had 3 ops rotations under my belt
Yep.
for 2 and 3 star battle staffs.
Yep.
And you know, and I had the NCOERs that said it,
Yep.
and you know, because you had to take your NCOERs, and you know, they went around the horn, and everybody's like, "Well, I was on an O5 level battle staff, and these are sergeant majors, and then there's me." It's like, yeah, I was on a 2 star and 3 star battle staff, and they're like, "No way,"
Yeah.
and it's like, yeah, here's yeah, my reviewer on my NCOER is General McChrystal,
Yeah.
you know,
With
and people couldn't wrap their heads around that.
and you had a speaking role.
Yes.
That's the
On
kicker is like yeah because I went when I but right before COVID hit, right before I got out of the military, I went down to GSOPSI, the Joint Special Operations Planning course. Andy Milburn was our GO, and they're like, you guys, you want a job? It's like because it was one of those things like as medics, like planning, like because like, you start thinking logistics. You think you actually are in this spot where you're able to look at the full like sustainment plan and realize like, oh, how do I nestle this in? Like, hey
yeah,
sir, question for you. You realize if you flush that C-130 for one person, you're losing your QRF, your ammo, and your gas. It's like,
yeah,
oh, shit, we didn't realize that. Like,
yeah. It is weird. It is weird being an E6 or E7 sitting around the table and you know, being the senior med planner for a task force. And you know, it was crazy. Some of those guys that were the task force commanders at the time, they all ended up being SOCOM
yep,
commanders,
yep,
USASOC commanders, like absolutely nuts.
yep.
I was incredibly lucky growing up where I grew up and given
Good.
the opportunities that I had.
Well, you bring up Stan McChrystal, like, so he is the reason why the 75th Ranger Regiment is like a Ranger Campbell or Ryan Davis can
Absolutely.
happen. Like he is the reason why those guys are alive because you know what he
Absolutely.
did? He made medicine a priority for
Yep.
everybody. And that's
Shoot,
my
move, communicate, evacuate.
yep. And that was my
Yep.
big thing was like you look at what we did in the soft side. I'm like, no, it can be exported to like a traditional unit. You just need to
Absolutely.
have somebody do it and you need to have buy-in. You need like and Stan McChrystal, when he was 275's commander, that's where it started. And then it
Yeah.
percolated through the entire community. And like, yeah, the 75th, if you get injured in the 75th Ranger Regiment and it's survivable, you're going to live.
Yeah. Like I said, it was the highlight of my professional life. Um, Sitting around the table on that staff,
Yep.
you know, for the number of years that I was there. Because and then after him, guess who we got after him as a commander? Admiral Bill McRaven, you know, and it was like those are, you know, I remember having to brief them. In fact, they were both there at Winter Strike, and we used to brief them. I used to brief them twice a day, you know, morning and
Yep.
evening stand up. And as I look back on that now, and I was just like, oh my God,
Yeah.
man, man, you want to talk about punching above my ability level? You know, I was a newly promoted E6, you know, briefing those guys twice a
Yep.
day.
And, you
You
know,
know,
it's the beauty of the community, man. Like, and that was always my thing. I look at you, I look at like all the guys I would hire or work with. It's like, I joke. It's a semi joke. It's like I need I need people who are okay with being underachievers because you
yeah,
like any of our people who can excel at what we did. Like they can go crush med school. They could go do a freaking PhD level work anywhere. But it's like, hey man, I need you to be underpaid, undervalued for the good of the freaking
yeah.
mission.
And I regret not going doing some of those things. You know, I wanted to go to PA school, thought about going to medical school, but I'll be honest with you, man, that stuff was just fun.
Yep.
I was having a ball and I was doing it with the best
Yep.
people. And I did not want to leave. I didn't want to leave my team, those people, that place. It was and even to this day I can run into any one of those guys
Yep.
and we're right back there. Yeah, I was grateful for that experience.
Yeah, man, that's the beauty of it. And like looking at my stopwatch, we're running to time, and I think this is a perfect way to wrap this up, man. But like
Yeah,
I really appreciate you coming on. I love going down memory lane and the stories and hearing the mutual names, and like and we'll be seeing you in North Carolina soon. So like,
yeah,
of course we'll be able to do this in real life. Like
absolutely.
disappear, but yeah, thanks again, man. So Dennis
Yeah,
Lyons, legend amongst men in the military medical community. I guess one of the keystones in the Mike Hetzler medical mafia that we run out here.
I tell you, when people say that, I don't believe it. Um, I'm just lucky I grew up where I did.
Yeah, but hey, it takes the right personality to do what you did, particularly to set the conditions for like. And it's I did. I went back to the aid station, seeing it happen today. Like so, again, thank you for everything you've done. Thank you for freaking mentoring me along my career, and we're gonna chat soon.